Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for AdTECH Out of Home Sydney, an extra slice. I'd like to welcome Emma Hegg, Group Director of Platforms at O Media, Melanie Lindquist, Managing Director at APAC of Talon Outdoor, and Phil Clemas, Co-founder and CEO of LUMO Digital Outdoor. Now, you were all at the conference a couple of weeks ago in Sydney. Mel and Phil as attendees, and Emma as a panelist and a speaker on one of the panels. What we do in the extra slice is just have a bit of a recap on some of the things that were spoken about on the day. You've had some time to think about it. Please add any subsequent thoughts, and let's talk about how it went and what we learned from it. I certainly was quite encouraged by the volume of the discussion in the coffee break in the foyer in the middle of the day. And also in the drinks afterwards, there was an awful lot of quite vibrant conversation as well. Mel, perhaps if I can start with you. You also attended AdTECH Out of Home in Singapore back in March. I'm not sure if that's why you came to Sydney, or whether you can compare the two, but what did you think? What did you take out of it?
Well, in terms of comparison, I think the AdTECH conference in Singapore was our first one back after quite a long hiatus. A lot of media owners in the room, and the conversations were definitely dominated by programmatic. In terms of Australia, obviously Australia is a really important market for Talon, and coming to Sydney, definitely looking at what was going to be discussed around programmatic and verification and audience measurement, because they're the three real topics that are dominating conversations with clients. It was actually really good to see how many people showed up at the conference too, because given that we've had a little bit of a break, I think we had over 150 people in the room, but not just from media owner side. We obviously had some clients, but also from the supplier side as well. So I thought that was really good. In terms of comparison with the Singapore event, the other thing I noticed too is that the conversation was definitely around programmatic, but there was some additional conversations to be had around the maturity of audience measurement in Australia. And that's certainly something that we watch very closely, and also around Asia-Pac is at varying levels of maturity. So the OMA definitely has a very strong reputation in APAC, and there is a lot of discussion around different audience measurement in different countries. And Malaysia at the moment is leading the way there, and Singapore is just starting to formulate how that works with the AAMS.
Yeah, that was a big piece of your panel, Emma, the standardization in and around the audience metrics and Move 1.5 growing into Move 2.0 over the next couple of years. It's good to know, I guess, that Australia is so advanced in the area of an accepted audience currency, but there's still a little way to go. Was what I took from the panel. Still plenty of work to do in terms of standardization.
Still plenty of work to do. I think, we've made some huge steps from where we were with Move 1.0, let's call it the original version of Move, with Move 1.5. The real game changer for us will be Move 2.0, which is obviously 2024, which is, super granular in terms of what it's going to deliver from a planning capability, and obviously a measurement capability, but really kind of getting us down to that granular hourly data by format, by site is going to be really a bit of a game changer across the industry. So yeah, look, I think there's still a lot of work that is happening in the background to get to that deadline of January of 2024. But we're moving at pace, and there's a lot of stuff that's happening to get us there.
Yeah. Phil, in New Zealand, it's been a long time since we had some Kiwis in the room for AdTECH Out of Home in Sydney. How did you find it? Glad you made the trip.
Yes, no, very, very happy. It was great to reconnect with our Australian friends and to sort of participate in really, I guess, an APAC event. I think New Zealand tends to be a little underrepresented in these sort of forums, so we sort of feel a bit of an obligation as a New Zealand-based operator, and we're 100% focused on digital out of home to be involved and to contribute positively. So yes, we're very happy to be there, and also thank you to Adrian and yourself, Joe, for involving presentation from our Jack and Chloe, who we wrapped up the show on the afternoon. So look, it was great to be there. Great to sort of hear and see about the positivity in the market generally. I think Australia is particularly looking really positive, and it is from a sort of a rebound perspective from the last couple of years. And New Zealand is probably a few months behind that sort of pace of improvement. We're all suffering from this sort of cost of living and inflationary depressed world we sort of live in, but we're beginning to see sort of small green shoots of improvement as we look towards Christmas, which is good to see. When we look back on our only other experience at the Sydney event, which was back in 2019, it still seemed apparent that we felt that there was still more of why and what about programmatic, particularly, rather than maybe we're hoping for a bit more of a how are things progressing, and how can we build a competitive and effective programmatic product. How can we future-proof our offering and sustain what we expect to be a fast-growing demand for digital out of home. And also, it would have been great to have seen a few more examples of how brands are actually using programmatic digital out of home to achieve specific milestones. Not so much case studies as such, they're always a bit difficult to create and share in those sorts of environments, but certainly would have been great to really see how some brands are already beginning to engage, because a lot of the markets around the world, there are seedlings, if you like, of programmatic digital out of home activity. LUMO, we're doing our bit to accelerate our own involvement and our own offering to our clients in our market. But it would have been good to see some more of those brands, and I think that's an opportunity moving forward. And I guess also buy-side involvement. There was very little. There was a small presence from the buy side. It would have been great to have had clients who've used programmatic. It would have been great to have some digital agencies. And so the question is, how can we all encourage more participation moving ahead? And lastly, I think the opportunity to educate was very apparent. The way the conversations and the panels were talking, and the conversations in between sessions, you definitely see there's still a strong demand and requirement to help educate and raise the level of understanding across the market, especially buy side. So so we thought great, but lots more to do.
Yeah, agree. And education is obviously a huge piece of that puzzle of moving into the future, as you bring together the digital natives and the out-of-home experts and merge together those skills. I'm loving your opinion, Phil. I do hear a rumor that we'll be running an AdTECH out-of-home Auckland sometime early next year. So it would be good if we can include some of the things you've mentioned there, so some real life examples of how programmatic is being utilised in New Zealand. And agree, the case study thing is quite a difficult thing to achieve. Many clients don't want to share the results of their campaign. Exactly. I think some of the conversation around the programmatic, the programmatic position, I guess, would be a good way to describe it. And that was one of the very interesting panels that created an awful lot of feedback and discussion immediately after the conference. And intentionally, we got some people who were more guarded and more careful about the way that they were starting to embrace and think about programmatic, and some people who were pushing the barrel, pushing the boundaries quite hard. how's it looking from a programmatic perspective in the rest of APAC, Mel? Phil mentioned that, you know, it's happening at a larger scale in other markets. We actually, during the Avant-Goo, we heard from Charles Parry-Oakton, who has networks in Europe, and he said up to 40% of his regular monthly revenue comes into the networks programmatically. How's the rest of Asia doing, Mel?
Well, there's certainly no standardized way of doing it, therefore no standardized results and way of booking. So in Asia Pac, it just varies from country to country. There is definitely more maturity in the European US markets. And also there's still some hesitation in markets from the media owner side as to what products are allowed on programmatic and what are not, and controlling the value of that asset too. And that's what's really keeping progress at a very slow pace. Yeah. So some way to go there as well. And Emma, I know that O Media are embracing the programmatic opportunity moving forward. You mentioned standardization, Mel, in terms of how it enables programmatic at scale. Are we starting to get there now, Emma, from an Australian perspective?
Look, I think we've definitely made some really significant inroads. I think one of the big challenges in this market was just around that standardized approach and actually really kind of understanding the metrics that were being used to evaluate impressions. So, you know, the OFC, the OMA working together with the suppliers has really allowed us to land that. And I think that's just the baseline, quite honestly. So we've got the baseline right. It's about to be launched into the market. So we'll see what that means. But I think, you know, there's still an awful lot of work to do around, you know, back to Mel's point around, you know, the value of an asset, an out-of-home asset is quite subjective. And a lot of the time, the performance metrics that are used across programmatic don't necessarily demonstrate what out-of-home actually brings to the table. And I think that's something that out-of-home suppliers probably have been a bit wary about in this market. And I can, you know, understand the sentiment of that across the globe as well, kind of coming at it now from a media supplier side. But I think, you know, it really kind of boils itself back down to, and I think it was probably one of the things that we didn't really address at the AdTECH event in Sydney, was what is the actual benefit for advertisers? I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in working out, yes, we can use programmatic for automated workflows and flexibility, and it gives us a point of difference in terms of trading out of home, but actually what is it bringing to the table to advertisers and their campaigns and the performance of those campaigns? And I think we've still got an awful lot of work to do around that.
Yeah, still some questions, and hence the requirement for so much education, so that we can all more collectively understand the answer to some of those questions. Phil, how's the standardization of the key metrics going in New Zealand? Listening to the LUMO presentation about getting the network future ready and future proof, you're taking a very progressive supply side, supply-led approach to that. How are the buy side in terms of engaging and their readiness in terms of understanding what their benefits of programmatic might be?
Work in progress. I would put it as simple as that. I think the advantage we have at LUMO is that we are 100% pure play digital, and we only have single large format roadside format to think about and offer our market. So so we have some advantage in the way that we think about the world we live in and how we can be quite agile on picking the different technologies that are available even today to create what we presented as a sort of a bespoke digital ecosystem designed for really the future, as we see it, of out of home. And so we're really keen to encourage greater engagement and discussion, collaboration really, around creating standards that we can all understand and deal with, and therefore help the market, help buyers, help clients better understand the value proposition. I think that's where we're getting to. I think one of the key things that we're all working for as a goal in the New Zealand market is, this is probably over the next year, is to set a sort of a foundation for a competitive and healthy programmatic ecosystem that will scale positively in all areas. So, you know, we need everybody's agreement and involvement really at the very forefront. And we're very fortunate to have the support of the IAB in New Zealand and you know, all of the players who operate in our space in New Zealand, at least talking and have the right, I guess, setting the right aspiration for the industry and for ourselves individually. But there's still work to do. And I guess what can be a bit frustrating is the speed. I mean, New Zealand, there's already 70% of all out-of-home revenue is traded through digital inventory, 60% or thereabouts in the Australian market. So we are well advanced and have very rapidly adopted digital out-of-home in our part of the world. And in fact, what I've seen in the last several months, I was fortunate to be up in Toronto at the World Out-of-Home Congress, and I did pop into the AdTECH Toronto. We happened to be on the same week. So it's quite interesting sort of breaking away from our part of the world, our little bubble down here at the bottom of the world, to actually see how we are going relative to others and to learn. And we're punching pretty well down here. And both Australia and New Zealand are doing very, very well. But I think we sort of need to continually push things along. And I think the big opportunity is to bring the buy side along with us as best we can. So yeah, so work to do, but you know, I think we're moving in the right direction pretty well.
Yeah, agree. And as the sole representative of the buy side, Mel, since Emma changed her hat a month or so ago, you know, what are the thoughts from Talon in terms of the contribution that the buy side might be able to make? Because as Phil says, collaboration towards standardization, yes, across all of the suppliers, but also important that the buy side have some input into any standards that get adopted by the sector.
So I think Emma and I did a bit of a switcheroo. I went from the media side to the buyer side to do it the other way. In terms of collaboration, I think with anything to do with the industry, collaboration and information gathering is critical to a really good sound strategy. So collaboration with buy and sell, media side, whatever it may be, it has to happen. You've seen it with audience measurement in Australia, where there was high levels of collaboration and therefore a standardization of audience measurement metrics, which agencies could use to find a baseline for how to compare each type of asset. That's not present in other countries in Asia Pacific as a standard. So each country has a slightly different way of measuring, and some of it is collaborative and some of it is individual. So you can imagine from the buy side what that looks like from a global perspective when you're trying to do campaigns that are in 40 different countries with 40 different metrics and sometimes with different ways of treating each out-of-home asset within a market. So if you want my very succinct answer is collaboration is critical. And the industry needs to participate and not let suppliers or say tech companies run with the technology. It has to be full collaboration, or you'll find you'll get to the other side of it and it'll either be a difficult position for the media owner, or it'll be difficult for the buyer side, or there'll be an issue where certain key components have not been considered, therefore it's not a strong holistic solution for the industry, and that can be very detrimental to out of home.
Yeah, agree. And Phil, would we expect more buyers in the room in Auckland in February? There were some. There were a good selection of buyers in Sydney, but it was probably a small proportion of the 150 people in the room. What can we do to entice them to get involved, do you think?
Yeah, look, I think there will be enough teamwork amongst those who are based here to persuade and encourage as many of our clients. I'm talking, we're talking a whole mix of different types of people from different parts of the industry, publishers, tech platforms, verification platforms, measurement technologies, and media agencies, both from a corporate perspective and also indies. There are a lot who have views and opinions and experiences in our space. And then between us all, help engage or get more engagement from the buy side, particularly clients and digital agencies. I think the thing is that we, and I'm talking about the royal we in our industry, still think a little bit old-fashioned, the old analog ways in an industry that is rapidly changing, and some are evolving and adapting quicker than others. But we tend to look at the buy side a little bit too further down the track. We need to be engaging with them earlier and finding out how can we really work in a truly digital world when we're so used to dealing in a traditional out-of-home world. So there's I think a feeling that a tipping point is coming very soon, and which is good. And I think the opportunities for you guys doing what you do and helping educate and inspire the market through the AdTECH conferences is good. And if we can add a meaningful one in Auckland, then we're keen to help and do our bit to do that. And I think New Zealand's always been one of those sort of markets, one of those sort of countries that is a really good test space, good test place for doing things with minimal negative impact if it doesn't quite go right, we put it that way, but a lot of upside, of course, if the testing is successful. So we're very open to that sort of attitude, and we'd be really keen to help make it a success early next year.
Yeah, and that's key to your point, Emma, I think, is finding out more about how these new ways of doing things, including programmatic, how do we measure the benefit of that in order that the advertisers who are getting involved with it have an understanding of what the additional value was to their campaign in terms of whatever their success metrics might be. So yeah, very good. Now, final key points, I think, to wrap up. Mel, are you coming to New Zealand?
No, I'm not making the trip out, sorry, but I will look at the video afterwards, I promise. So in terms of what I'd like to see, even at the Singapore conference, which I think might be earmarked for April next year, I definitely want to see demonstrable proof of programmatic, like a high usage of programmatic as part of a schedule and what the results were. I think that layer of proof, like with audience measurements and metrics and with verification, it just gives everybody in the room more to work with, and also gives us a point from which to advocate. And then also, in addition to that, is the client perspective. I would really like to hear more from clients like Uber. I think Andy Morley had us all enthralled when he was talking about increasing his budget in out-of-home next year. So I mean, he's had a lot of phone calls since the conference. I don't know if you want to edit that out, because I don't know if he wants that to be any public knowledge. But the one thing with Andy and Neil on stage was that Andy obviously did a lot of test and learn, and that was really good to see. I mean, we've seen a lot of the Uber campaigns on varying platforms and media, and I think that they are one of the key brands that really show what can be done when you take a leap of faith and also trust in the medium and adjust to it. Taking out of home off the schedule, watching the results not be as strong as the previous campaign, then seeing what happened when he added it back on is fantastic to hear, and also gives everybody in the room more to talk about with clients. So I'd love to see more of that in the next conference as well, and all conferences, ways that we can demonstrate what we know is high value and out of home, and a medium that can deliver results.
Yeah, great to have a true believer in the room who had a really deep understanding of what out of home contributed to his communications. Emma, are there any other clients like that we should invite to the next one?
I'm sure there will be by this time next year. Look, it's a growing space, right? And there will be a lot of focus, I think, probably from the sell side on proving that programmatic can work for advertisers. I think there's still a lot of understanding that still needs to happen from across the whole industry, and that kind of ladders back to that education piece. And I also think that that exists within the client space as well. Depending on who they're talking to within their agency, they might be getting different answers to what programmatic brings to the table. So I still think there's a lot of work to be done there. But I agree with Mel that I think it would be great to see some more clients in the room, and to have those clients who are not necessarily advocates for out of home, but people who can just talk really honestly about why and how and what the results were. And I think that's an important next step for us as well. I think it would be great to talk a little bit more about the how. Like, I think, talking about data in the next one, and what is actually available to advertisers to use within this ecosystem, and what that can actually do to kind of enhance campaigns as well. I think that's probably a piece that's been missing for a while. There's been a lot of talk around how the tech can provide the automation and the effective workflows, but I think there's really some work to do around enhancing the capabilities that sits inside of that. And it would be great to be able to discuss that further at some of the other conferences.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. Phil?
Maybe Charles can come along and have a talk about his experience in Europe. It was quite interesting chatting to him about, I think he was talking specifically about his operation in Germany, and how Streuer in Germany also have about 40% of their revenues traded programmatically, which is really exciting. In fact, they've moved away from ad slots and loops, to this different world, future world of trading in an out-of-home space. So I think that's the opportunity for us, right? Is to have an environment where we are blurring the lines between digital out-of-home and digital online. We're sort of large screens, small screens, online screens. We're sort of all screens, and to a certain extent. And I think that's the opportunity for us, because if we're all sort of fighting in a world of 5 or 6% of all ad spend in our respective markets in this part of the world. I think we'd like to fight in a slightly bigger pond, and I think the way for us to access that is by really understanding the needs of those digital buyers and providing the solutions through our own, our networks. It's nothing much more complicated than that. Well, it is complicated, but you know what I mean? The idea is quite simple. So I think the ingredients for us working forward towards that sort of ideal situation in the near future is very encouraging. I think we should all, continue to think in that respect. And I think we, certainly in our local market, we're thinking in those sort of those sort of ways of moving away from the traditional ways in which our media is sliced and diced and bought, to providing, moments when the advertiser wants to reach their market, when and where they're there. That's the reality of where we're going, and we're very excited about that. And I think those in our space who embrace the technology capabilities faster will ultimately rule or lead the way in a truly digital out-of-home space in the future. And I think that's not that far away. So we're excited.
Yeah, it does feel like there's more excitement. It's more exciting than daunting these days. I think there's a real positive momentum in terms of the willingness to embrace new ways of doing things. And I'm feeling that. I was feeling that more in the room this year than in any previous years. So yeah, I've got the same feeling. So we're looking forward to getting Auckland agenda together. Thanks so much for joining us, Mel, Emma, and Phil. We'll see you again soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for having us.